I like that. So, dude, you look so young and fresh, man.
I know, dude. I look like a little baby. So I was trimming it, and I have like an electric trimmer. It's so long that I can't use the little guides because it's too short. So I was just trying to wing it, and I went. Bzz, I was like, no, shit. I had to cut the whole damn thing off because I screwed it up.
That looks good, man. That looks good.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. All right, dude. So are you ready to get started?
Yes, I am, man.
All right, dude. Let's do it. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. The Beyond UX Design shop is open. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/shop to pick up some big, beautiful art prints of some of my favorite UX and software-related quotes, or pick up some digital downloads and print them yourself. Pick up your copy of Beyond UX Design, master your craft beyond pixels and prototypes. Get free shipping on all orders over $30 and use the code LISTENER to get 10% off your entire order. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/shop to get your print on. This week's episode is brought to you by Wix Studio. If you're thinking about redoing your portfolio or kicking off a new website project, listen up. I only have 30 seconds to tell you about Wix Studio, the web platform for agencies and enterprises. So here are a few things that you can do from start to finish in 30 seconds or less on Studio. You can adapt your designs for every device with responsive AI. You can jump seamlessly between front-end and back-end, speed up projects with an AI code assistant, start a design library, reuse full-stack apps and UI components across multiple sites. So time's up, but the list keeps going. Step into Wix Studio and see for yourself. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/Wix to start creating today. This week's episode is brought to you by Figma Academy from Dive Club. Now, we usually talk soft skills here in the show, but let's not forget hard skills are just as important too, and mastering tools like Figma is crucial. And in the past, we've talked about knowledge debt and how you'll pay for learning either with your time or with your money. Well, if you don't have time to learn it on your own, Figma Academy is your fast track to mastering Figma, and you'll be in good company too. Over 4,000 designers from industry leaders like Shopify, Microsoft, and Amazon have already taken the plunge. The course is hands-on, and you'll be part of a talented cohort of designers. Plus, they host live Q&A sessions every Thursday to clear up any questions that you have. And because you're all awesome listeners, I've teamed up with Figma Academy to offer you a $100 discount. Just head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/Figma and use the promo code BeyondUX at checkout to kickstart your Figma mastery journey today. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That would help me out so much more than you know. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, and Marty for all their support. And if you want to join these fine folks and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you'll get rough transcripts and exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're released. And you can get instant access to the video archives right now for as little as $5 a month. For more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing here, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told your mom and them. So as designers, a lot of times, a lot of us at least, I don't know, we'll get jobs at a little startup and we'll work with our insular little group of friends or people, maybe in the same city, maybe remote, who knows? Maybe a lot of times though, especially in the United States, we're working with people in the US. But if you get a job for a big multinational corporation or even some smaller companies, they might outsource and you might end up working with teams overseas. And when that happens, you got to think about the culture. You got to think about how you're going to interact with those people and the culture and everything else that comes along with it. Now, if you're in Europe, you've got a unique benefit. You could work, if you live in Spain, you could work in Greece, you could work in Norway. Is Norway part of the EU? Actually, I don't even know. You could work in all these various countries, and those cultures are totally different. So how do you do that? So it's really fascinating. So I am really excited to have my good buddy, Joseph Mercieca here. He is originally from Malta, and he's living in Ireland now. And he's got an interesting perspective on how to work with various cultures across Europe, obviously, but even in Asia and North and South America. So I'm really excited to have Joseph on. So I'm really excited to have Joseph on the show today. With over a decade of experience, Joseph has guided multinational stakeholders in leveraging UX, CX, CRO, and KPIs to drive growth through optimized products and services, including enterprise SaaS, machine learning software, web, and apps. His expertise lies in leading research and design initiatives through strategic planning and multidisciplinary stakeholders, tackling complex challenges and fostering design culture across diverse settings. His interests encompass design, futures, cognitive behaviorism, ubiquitous computing, AI, ethics, and the geopolitical influence of the digital ecosystem. And in his downtime, he enjoys traveling, writing articles, volunteering, and performing music. Joseph M., welcome to Beyond UX Design. I'm out of breath from reading all that stuff. It's great to have you on. How's it going, man?
Mutual, all good. So I am currently in Ireland. Today is a sunny day, by the way, in Ireland, which is quite mesmerizing. It's all cloudy, rainy, and God bless the cold weather. And that's the reason why I avoided the south, because currently it's like a blazing inferno as we speak.
Oh my God, I bet.
Yeah, but as things are, Ireland, but there is also a possibility that I may go back to the north, because prior I was in Finland, and I must say I miss the cold. I miss the cold and the ice, and pretty much I tend to call myself as the son of cold, son as in S-O-N.
I love it, dude. That's hilarious. Joseph, so I'm so excited to have you on today. Before we get into the conversation, we got some special news. We are going to be doing a live event. We're going to be hanging out on YouTube and LinkedIn on Thursday, September 26, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Before we start talking, let's tell everybody a little bit about that. What do you want people to ask about? Because I'm going to set up a form. People can submit questions ahead of time. What do you want people to ask you questions about for that live Q&A?
That's a rather good question. So, people can ask me about what it feels to work in different countries. Well, I can speak mainly about Europe and also about North American cultures, and also things people must take into consideration before either looking for work and also before getting to know people from certain cultures, to put it frankly. Now, concerning the cultural part, although I am focused in Europe and although my experience happened to be mainly Western-driven, I can also spread some tips about working with cultures beyond the West, like, for instance, Asia, the Global South, Middle East, and so on. And in addition to that, this might go slightly beyond the key topic in question. I am also happy to take questions regarding designing solutions for different cultures, different nations, and so on. Because nowadays, one thing I see that designers are not taking into consideration when designing solutions are cultural needs and regionalization. This relates to taking into consideration the nation's policies, regulations, and so forth.
Oh, that's an interesting one that I had never even considered myself. Cool. So we're gonna set up an event page where you can submit questions. So make sure if you submit your questions early, we'll also let you ask questions the day of. But if you get them in a little bit early, we'll make sure that you get those questions answered. So check out beyonduxdesign.com/events. And don't forget, join us September 26, 9 a.m. Eastern. Joseph and I will be hanging out live. All right. So coming from Malta, that's, in the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
You're right between, I think you mentioned, Malta, you said it's close to Libya and it's close to Italy, right?
Yeah. So basically, Malta is in the intersection of North Africa and South Europe. So it's in between. And to put it frankly, so it's a tiny island, but it's been exposed to different cultures. For example, the French, and in time, it became part of the UK. Hence, Malta nowadays is still part of the Commonwealth.
Really? Yeah. I don't think I knew that. Okay.
Yeah. So basically, for example, in the UK, I can also vote for the elections, to put it frankly.
Really? I had no idea. Yeah. Okay. That's interesting.
So that was that. So pretty much, the location itself makes Malta pretty much, without thinking, it makes Malta kind of multicultural. And also, exposed to cultures. And also, one phenomena, which I kind of crossed my mind later in time, is that most of us are trilingual. Like, we speak 3 languages. We have English and Maltese as native languages. And then we have the third language, which could be Italian, French, or German. In my case, I picked Italian first, German later. If I could rewind time backwards, I could at least pick French instead. But anyhow, that's my preference. So that's a little bit in a nutshell. But in time, just to shed some context, I moved to the UK, and I spent some time in the UK, Germany, Norway, Finland, Ireland, and nowadays I'm just thinking about locations depending on when I find, hopefully, my long-term challenge, because currently the situation in Europe is a little bit of I suppose just like in the US, it's a bit of a mess, given the, layoffs and how the US layoffs influence things in Europe. Because also, I mean, moving in Europe is a little bit difficult in a way. Well, not difficult per se, but looking for work in Europe can be a bit of a challenge because recently I applied for a role in Netherlands. One of the reasons why I got rejected is because I'm not in the Netherlands. So there is that. And the thing is, I often have to remind people that Europe is not a big continent like North America, Latin America, and so on. And, it's like I can spend 1 hour traveling and I'm already in the next country.
That's
I
crazy.
can do a U-turn, I'm in another country, which means we have different languages, cultures, legislation, you name it. And at times I have to remind people that some countries are massive, like France, Germany, but others are not so big, like Netherlands, Belgium, Malta, which is a tiny island. And often people at times, it feels that some people are really oblivious to that fact. So I often have to remind people like, hey, this is not the US. It's not like I'm traveling from California to New York and I'm still in the US. This is Europe, man. It's like country to country. And, I can take half an hour flight and boom, new country, new culture, new everything. So yeah.
That is why we're going to have you on today. And we're going to talk all about that and how designers can adjust and excel and thrive in those different environments. And that idea, especially in Europe, it's I think Americans, we take it for granted. I used to live in Louisiana and I would drive a couple hours to Mississippi or Texas or Arkansas, or wherever. Different cultures for sure. But I mean, at a macro level, we were all pretty homogenous, right? You might have trouble understanding someone in southern Mississippi, maybe. For the most part, pretty much everything was almost the same. In Europe, it's very different. Obviously, when you're traveling, that's very cool and it's really awesome to experience. But when you're trying to get a job, different languages and all that alone, I'm sure there's a lot of requirements around needing to speak the native language and things like that, even though you are an hour away. Very different cultures. So we're going to talk all about that today. I want to hear from you a little bit. When you think about software, it's global, right? I mean, I could do my work from literally anywhere. And so you end up with these teams working across the world. I'm curious, just from your perspective, kicking it off the bat, what are some, overall challenges? You kind of highlighted the language and stuff a little bit, but overall challenges that you found going from all these various countries and trying to find work as, an EU citizen, but still, I guess, a foreigner in those individual countries. Some challenges that you face there.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to give some context to the listener. So as a European, I can work across Europe, including countries I have agreements with Europe, like Switzerland, Norway, and so on, because Norway is not part of Europe. So challenges per se, I mean, aside relocation, like finding a place to live and so on, even though to me per se, it was not a real challenge because maybe I was lucky. The key challenge relates to languages. Often some companies or countries per se, they require you to speak the local language. For example, Germany, despite being so multinational, they still emphasize German language as opposed to other nations. For example, the Nordics, to take Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Norway, they also, emphasize on the language, but not as hard as other countries. Now, again, key reason behind the language is, like I remember one company I worked with in Finland is, and I could also say it about myself, it's because some of the stakeholders, they don't speak English. So, for example, I could not secure, for instance, a senior or lead role as a designer because to be a lead, I would need to speak to stakeholders. Many could not speak Finnish. So that means I cannot progress any further in my career, or at least with that company. And also when they advertise, thankfully they say like, okay, we ask for Finnish because most of our stakeholders are Finnish. So some companies, they give the reason to that, like why we enforce the language. But not everywhere is like that. So you find companies who accept, who don't require the language, particularly if their working environment is in English. But then it also comes to the case that this is also prominent to companies, be it European companies with, say, offices or presence in the US or vice versa. US companies with offices and activity across Europe or anywhere else in the world. So such companies tend to be more tolerant. It depends where they operate. So there is also that. So the more international the company is, the more likely they might not be so strict in languages. However, strictness also prevail in user research because you have to speak to people.
Right.
You have to know the language. So there is also that. But that was it, generally speaking. And then the next, which I may expand later on, is getting used to the cultural norms of that country and the company. Because also companies, they have their own organizational cultures. thanks God, I was in most cases resilient to cultural shocks. Maybe it's because of my background, because often I say we people of islands, people who come from islands, we see everything big. So we tend to be more resilient to change. At the same time, also more adaptive to comply with the bigger world. At least that happened to me. But what I learned is that even despite being in Europe and even despite working with other cultures out of Europe, like the global South, Asia Pacific, Latin America, you name it, there are still, how to say, norms and other nuances, which I could keep on talking forever, but I also want to make sure that, whether you have any questions in the meantime.
Yeah, so all of this is like super fascinating to me. And again, I think we get spoiled here in the United States. It's just like English, everyone speaks English. I work for a multinational global conglomerate and everybody spoke English, didn't matter what country you were in. So it's crazy because like I personally, I've said this all the time, but I have so much respect for people who can have a technical conversation in a second language and not just like ask where the bathroom is, but like have a technical conversation and even sometimes debate and convince and influence in a second language. That just, it blows my mind. Just mad respect for anybody that can do that, because that is just incredible to me. And just like the thought of doing anything but asking where the bathroom is in another language, blows my mind. So I just mad props to you. You said you speak 3. That's we probably speak more than that now, though, right? I guess.
Yeah, I actually I speak Maltese, English, Italian fluently, moderate German, basic Norwegian, and I can also understand basic Arabic, basic Czech language. Wow. And I was also studying Finnish, but I gave up. It's too difficult. And Chinese also.
Yeah, well, Finnish and Hungarian are similar, related. So I tried Hungarian. I got some my Hungarian dictionary. I tried that for a long time. I think it fried my brain. Anyway, Hungarian is very hard. I imagine Finnish is the same. So I want to talk a little bit. You brought up some really interesting points in designing, not just and joining a team. It's not just the national culture or the cultural identity and the norms of those people. It's the companies themselves. Even within that, will have very often very different things. And so I think we often kind of ignore that fact that companies are all different and dealing with the cultures and stuff of the people, plus the cultures of the teams, but then even designing for users that you might not even be familiar with. So it's just like really interesting. I want to kick off just sort of thinking through, and I know that each of these experiences are very personal, and it's not like we can say your experience is going to be the same that everybody would have.
Absolutely.
But I'm curious, it's like, getting a job in another country, I want to talk through some strategies there. Like, how do you do that? I don't even know how you would start, to be honest, if I were starting to look for jobs in another country. What is that like? You talk through that process of finding a job and applying and working with people, especially when you might not even be in that country and you're applying and you hope to move there?
Absolutely. So my experience is limited to Europe, even though from time to time I tried, the US and Canada, but then visa implications, especially nowadays. But I was also lucky to speak with a few American companies for roles in Europe. So sticking to Europe, I think it's really a matter of having a good resume and a good portfolio. Pretty much portfolio is universal. Now, of course, what people see in portfolio, that varies. And that's where I can also shed a bit of light here. Thankfully, my resume used to stand out, and people tell me, your resume freaking stands out, right? So there is that. However, the challenges that I had wasn't even about sending the application. It's about, like recently as we speak, not being in the host country. Recently, I also realized that there is a thing which I call IP address discrimination.
They look and see where you are and they won't filter out. Okay.
And I can shed a little bit of story. So basically, there was one US company with offices in Europe operating in Netherlands, but they also acquired a scale up in Denmark. So I applied, I got rejected. I said, okay, whatever. 2 months passed by. And I was about, let me give them another chance. So they use Workday, by the way. I think I have to mention that, because with Workday, you have to fill in a lot of information. Then, while I was about to fill in to send the application, I spotted the email address of the recruiting team. And I decided to reach them out. I explained, does it really make sense for me to reapply again? They answered my email. I was like, wow. They explained, we rejected your application because you are not based in Denmark. I said, okay. And I said, just to let you know, I lived in the Nordics. So, because in the Nordics, Norway, Finland, Denmark, they share a single public registry. So pretty much each state, they talk to each other. It's like we are neighbors. How to say? It's a Nordic system. It's a Nordic thing. So I brought that up. And secondly, I said, just so to let you know, it will take me 1 week in my case to find a place in Denmark. So unlike other people, I know how to relocate. I don't need help. And that secured me the interview.
Wow,
that secured me the interview. And fast forward, so the recruiter explained what happened. And they said that most likely what happened is you did not fill in your address. And because you didn't do that, we usually do 2 things: your IP address and your LinkedIn profile. And pretty much, I didn't want to argue on that, but, I wanted to ask that person, like, okay, what if I happen to be on vacation? Maybe I am on Spain, enjoying my blue Caracao, and because the beaches are so boring, I decided to load my laptop and applying while being on the beach. Or maybe I'm just in an event or conference somewhere else, or maybe visiting family. How about that? But I didn't want to, keep on dragging because time was ticking and it was time for the interview. Didn't want to make the wrong impression. But still, that is one thing that I discovered last week. It is so fresh, man.
Wow. So is that illegal, though, to do that? To discriminate based on location in the EU when, in theory, everybody should have equal chance? Regardless of...
Yeah, I mean, okay, one thing I must mention is this company deals with finances, taxes, and so on. And yeah, some companies, they require you to be domiciled for legal reasons. So yes, there can be such a requirement. Like even recently, I stumbled upon roles and only candidates resident in NATO countries can apply.
Wow,
now, Ireland is not part of NATO, so there is that. So there are a lot of these little nuances which are becoming the new norm recently, and also coupled with some eerie rejections, which I can also shed a little bit on that, but this might also go a little bit off topic.
Yeah, that's okay. Go ahead.
Well, okay. I was dealing with one company. So I applied with one Dutch company, coincidentally, but they're part of a big company present in the US and so on. The recruiter from the US, so she reached me out and we had a call. And pretty much, I thought it was going to be just an informal chat, but pretty much she told me that the hiring manager, the design manager, saw my resume, my portfolio. He was very impressed. A lot of honeycoating, to it frankly. And I was really, I was filled with hope and joy. I was like, yeah, I mean, maybe something good's going to come in. Fast forward, I got interviewed with the design manager. It was just an informal talk, about my background, how I work with stakeholders, design processes, the usual yada yada, I call it. Then I got rejected. And the reason was because I'm too overqualified for the role.
Oh, yeah. I hate that. Yeah.
And, it was like, okay, so they were honeycoating me because of my experience, skills, and so on. Then suddenly, I said, this doesn't really make sense. So I sent an email back and I said, okay, I think we both know that it's not the case. I mean, I want honest feedback, so at least I can learn from my mistakes if there was any. They didn't answer, so I emailed again and they didn't like my being persistent. I mean, I came across to them as passive-aggressive. And they said, we don't like this aggression. I said, excuse me, I'm not being aggressive to you. I'm simply asking for feedback.
So what country was this? Do you feel like this was maybe societal norms that you were breaking, I guess, by emailing them too much, perhaps?
No, I mean, perhaps. I mean, these were like 2 emails only, and these were like 2 short emails, and they were pretty much very, how to say, like, is it possible to have a feedback? That kind of that kind of tone. Okay. Or may I have, a proper feedback as to what was the real reason behind this rejection? Because I said, like, we both know what you mentioned, it's not really the case. And it turned out to be true, It turned out to be true.
Yeah, why not say that?
Yeah, so basically, what happened is, just to shed some context, so when I spoke to the designer, we went past the time, and we were having a wonderful conversation. We had a second interview 1 hour later, a continuation, to continue our conversation. So it was fun. So I had his email address. So I decided to email them both. First, so pretty much I CC'd both of them. What happened is both answered me. So the recruiter said, because I'm being overqualified. The designer said, because I'm not in the country and because other people had closer experience because the product is a little bit unique. And I said, okay, so we have 2 different versions of the story. Which one is the correct one? Of course, I would stick with the designer. And he explained and so on. So was it so hard to be honest? Because, I mean, thanks to this feedback, at least now I can make informed decisions as to what I can do next. But a lot of hassle behind that, just to get this basic feedback. And eventually I also ended the conversation like, okay, I mean, despite you guys calling me aggressive for asking for feedback, thanks God I am consistent in my words.
A takeaway there for me, is just like one, always follow up because you never know if they're going to reply. But two, I feel like, there's also, when we think about cultures, like obviously, we said, the societal norms, but there's something there in that team's culture that I think you picked up on. There's probably lack of communication across the board. There's probably lack of transparency that, these are sort of red flags that you're kind of picking up as someone shifting across cultures, going from one team culture to another team culture. I think there's a lot of interesting things. I'm curious if you had thought about that at all, dealing with these people and kind of what you're able to tell from that team's culture based on your interaction with these few people.
That's a good question. I mean, this was a little bit of a novel case. Because typically when people give a reason behind the rejection after an interview, typically I get a story that makes sense, that is consistent to what we discussed. Even if I failed in something, at least I got told like, you didn't do well here or there as opposed to another candidate. Okay, thank you. I mean, it sucks, but at least I know I can improve. But no, this one was unique, man. This one was unique. And FYI, I mentioned Dutch company, but the people were not Dutch. I mentioned one of them was from the US, but the other person happened to be Southern European also. So pretty much South like me. But no, I don't think it was a matter of, culture. I think this was more, maybe more on a personal level, perhaps, like, people maybe not being so direct. And this is also something I experienced since I brought up about directness. Some cultures in Europe they're not that direct. So there's also that. Now I'm going to skip on to another part of Europe, perhaps, not necessarily part of Europe, but also part of other cultures, like about directness. In Germany, it's okay to be direct. I mean, like, if something doesn't work, we can say it doesn't work. We need to work on that, we need to fix it.
Yeah, Germans are known for being sort of, I don't know, harsh is the wrong term, maybe, but very straightforward. No bullshit kind of people.
Yeah, so pretty much, there are hiccups, but one thing I love about Germany is that at times I know where I am. Now, for example, in the Nordics, Scandinavia, to be precise, excluding Finland, because Finland is not Scandinavian. Like, if you are direct, they can also backfire. One thing I learned is I had to rework my communication not to come across as confrontational. Now, I also happen to be a very energetic person, and I also have a deep voice because I'm also a singer, coincidentally. But I also had to find ways on so on, kind of sounding like that and so on, just not to be perceived as aggressive, even though this is not a matter of aggression. This is just a matter of having an energetic personality, but it could be perceived that way in the Nordics. And this is not just my experience, it's also experience of other people I met. So that was number one. And two, if something is not okay, like say we built a new feature, it's not working. If I say, this is not working, at times it helps, at times it works, especially if I know my colleagues. But for example, with new colleagues, I have to find the right way, the right timing, the right tone. Pretty much I had to readjust my about finding the right demeanor, to be frank. And I used to come across as super direct at times, whereas in other cultures, I am just the old me. But for instance, jumping to Finland, my experience was, being direct, for example, it's okay over there. So pretty much, if something doesn't work, I can say that. Of course, I have to know my limits, but it wasn't as strict as neighboring countries. So communication per se, I think that was the biggest challenge that I had. I think I would say really it's all about communication, to be frank. How to communicate and when to communicate. One thing I remember, this is more about team level. Back in Germany, I had the opportunity, the marvelous opportunity to work. It was a great company. I love the people. But I remember when I was interviewing the CTO, who happened to be a co-founder, he told me dudes, we are a bunch of introverts, I'm going to let you know in advance. And I took him lightly. And I said, so wrong. What's wrong being introvert? At times I am extroverted, but I can also be a super introvert. And he was like, okay, fine. Some months passed by. There was a team of machine learning engineers and data scientists. And they use, when they overfocus, it's like you don't hear a single noise. And I saw this guy and I said, dude, can I have a word with you? Yeah, he asked me, we're having a coffee. He asked me, how are you doing? And I said, dude, I'm really impressed how silent these data scientists are. I said, even a graveyard is more cheerful than the room right now. And he couldn't stop laughing. And then he told me, dude, I told you, I told you before that we are a bunch of introverts. And I said, okay, now I see. Now I see what you meant. But that also reflected into another story. There were times when I needed help from these people, and I could not. I felt a bit intimidated about, getting into their room because everybody was focused. And at times I could also see the data scientist lead coming around, walking around. It felt like he was policing the area. And I mean, he happened to be a fun guy. But I think they were under pressure one day. And then he told me, like, dude, if you need any help, talk to me first before you talk to anybody else, just to keep them doing their job. So and I said, like, you're a lifesaver because, there are moments where I needed to speak to somebody, but then I refrained and I kept on postponing my questions for later. So one thing I learned is observe, and I'd ask questions, literally speaking, ask questions. Because when you ask questions, you will never assume. And that's one thing I also see a lot nowadays. Nowadays, I think that people just assume too much. So that was one scenario that I had. But yeah, it's all about how to communicate and when to communicate, and also relationship building at work. And this also leads me to one point which I tend to stress on a lot of people. I might be deviating a bit from the topic, but one thing that helped me at the workplace when it comes to, getting to know people, handling conflicts, and so on, is getting to know your team members, your teammates.
Yeah, so important.
What I do is, when I join a new team, I spend the first month getting to know everybody, having fun, sharing jokes, seeing what they are doing, taking interest in what they are doing. Because what happens is, when people get to know you, let's move fast forward. Let's say we are ideating on a new design, on a new feature. Maybe there is a technical issue and so on. And let's imagine I just jump in with an idea or with a question or something. People wouldn't say, like, who the heck is that person? Especially if I can come up with an unorthodox idea. People would say, it's Joe. Okay, we knew him. He is a whatever guy, a fun guy. We know him. So what happens is resistance is diminished because trust has been established way long time ago. And this is something I recommend other people doing. Get to know your people first, because when you do that, then even when it comes to these cultural nuances, because people know you, things will be different. And since I tend to be a bit energetic, like, I got told that I can be very direct. That became a fun factor about me, from a problem to a fun factor. Like, for example, when I had a fun company, they told me, we're going to miss you and your directness, man.
Somebody needs to be direct around here. So that I love that advice, because, like, this is something that I give the same advice. You join a team, your job in the first 30 days is not to do any actual work. It is to understand the people, understand the problem, understand what's going on, get the context. Yeah. And when I think about, in the United States, we're all like, let's say we're in the same city, we understand those cultures and everything else. But when you are joining a new team, different culture, even if it's a company culture, if it's a national culture or a society that's different from yours, that's even more reason to go in there, because, we often tend, in-group, out-group bias. We see somebody come in, they offend us. They're not part of our clique. They're not part of our group. We're going to get upset with them. They're trying to insult us. They're trying to demean us in some way. But if you're part of the group and you make a mistake, same mistake, they're going to let it slide. They're going to say, oh, we don't say that around here. Oh, like we know you didn't mean anything by it. We know you well enough to know, this isn't something that you meant to insult us. And so that's really important, because, aside from work related stuff, just societal stuff, if it's a lot easier to have those hard conversations when you're friends, when you know them. Let's say you're friends. Let's say when you know them well, you work together, you trust them. It's a lot easier to have those hard conversations, even if, especially when it's some kind of like societal norm that you broke, you like insulted the king or something. You're like, oh, we don't say that around here, that kind of stuff. That's the thing that I think is so important, getting to know your team. I am kind of curious. I want to talk a little bit more about, like, job hunting.
Sure.
You mentioned this a couple of weeks ago when we talked. Different countries expect different things, and they expect to see different things. Talk a little bit about that. You mentioned specifically service design. Yeah, I like hearing that, like, some countries take that a little bit more seriously, but
I am more than happy to share some points. So, to shed context, I am a product designer. I also do research, and I'm a big research advocate. I'm also heavily focused on accessibility. I also treat things more from an accessibility standpoint, depending on the project or product or service, you name it. Now, yes, there are quite a lot of nuances, and I deal with them, day by day. So, recalling my good old days in the UK, and I can also add the US and Ireland. So, pretty much Ireland and the UK, pretty much what they seek isn't any different from the US. Simple as that. So pretty much the way I see that is that these nations, they value solid UX skills, design thinking, visual design, and so on. So pretty much what makes a good designer good. And also experience working with certain type of people. Of course, there are also certain domains. As a fintech company, we prefer somebody who got fintech experience that you find everywhere, for example. So pretty much the requirements are rather balanced. Jumping down to Europe, and this also includes recent events. Germany, where should I start? So for starters, I don't want to generalize, and it doesn't apply to all companies. One thing I keep noticing is that UX research, it's more like a checklist thingy. It's not really prioritized. It is becoming a thing recently, but I've been absent also from Germany. But when I spoke to other designers from Germany, they told me the same thing. UX research is still a bit of a side thingy. This applies to small to mid-range companies. So basically, their focus happened to be more on visual design. And for instance, like I had rejections, like you don't have enough visual in your portfolio. Even though I have visuals, I have UI, it's like it's never enough. And here is one interesting case that I had recently. I was dealing with one fintech scale up. And what happened is I got interviewed by the recruiter. So the way they work is first I get a recruiter interview. If I'm likable, they forward the application. So it's like the hiring manager doesn't know that I got interviewed until the recruiter does like, hey, I spoke to that dude. What do you think? Personally, I don't like that method, but so be it. So anyway, then I got rejected. I got rejected even though the interview was great, and I wanted answers. I'm going to be honest. I wanted answers. So what happened is I found their design director on LinkedIn, and I added him, and thankfully he answered and he gave me feedback. And he gave me some useful tips, so I'm really thankful for the feedback. Because thanks to him, I also managed to retweak myself and the way I present myself and so on. I mean, long story short, I have a lot of processes, so I had to go easy on processes and more on UI. In the past, it used to be the other way around, all processes and so on. But for instance, one more reason that I got rejected is because the UI design of my portfolio doesn't look like the UI design of the company.
What? It's a bizarre.
Yeah, I was like, what? I mean, like, can't I have my own brand, my own identity, my own color scheme?
That's bizarre.
It wasn't like the main reason, but it was, it played a part. So I was like, seriously, guys. So it's like I don't even have the freedom to decide how I should decorate my portfolio, even though my portfolio is super minimal. But yeah, that was interesting, man. So yeah, UI design. Now, let's jump into other countries. I noticed similar trends in Italy, for instance. Not that I was looking for roles in Italy, but I got interviewed by people from Italy in other countries. But what I found fascinating is my recent discovery in Poland. There is an interesting obsession or a healthy obsession about growth design or design for growth. When you apply over there, or at least for roles hailing from Poland, you must demonstrate that you have experience, dealing with growth, pushing for growth, and so on. And there is an emerging trend. I remember I spoke to recently to one designer from Poland, and yeah, I was being told that there is, it's like it's becoming a thing. So, because it's like, I think the attitude was like, yeah, there are a lot of good designers, but we want designers who can do something more.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Claiming growth. And yeah, growth is fair. But, until a while back, I didn't realize that growth design was a thing. So I had to understand like whether I scratched it or not. And thankfully I scratched it thanks to it. I did a lot of CRO, but still it was novel for me. Now jumping to Finland, for example, there is an amazing obsession, a good one actually, with service design.
Yeah.
And when I entered the market, I was like, oh my God, I feel so backwards, man. I was like, I have so much I need to learn. I mean, these people are off the league. It's really, I felt like a Mr. Nobody. Because yeah, I met a lot of amazing people, amazing designers. designers over there. They value, even small companies, their aim is to become design mature, to achieve that. And, I was like impressed. I was speechless, man. I was freaking speechless. Then jumping to Norway, for example. Now, Norway, again, UI design. It's all about UI design and just UI design. Everything surrounds UI design. Once I got told through a recruiter that I'm not a good designer. He's not a good designer. I asked, okay, what makes you think that I'm not a good designer? And it happened because a couple of my case studies on my portfolio were since 2014. Now, these happen to be amazing case studies, but these are also a few of my best.
Because they're just old?
Because they are backdated, yeah. So because they are from 2014, that makes me a bad designer.
Are they implying then that because you don't have anything new, stale, you're old, you should have new even if it was a great portfolio piece from 10 years ago? You should have new stuff. Why are you showing us old stuff? Or do you not have anything good to show?
I had new stuff. But by new, it wasn't like, so this happened in 2022. The recent thing that I had was maybe in 2020. So maybe let's say that there was like a 1 year old gap. Now, this never happened to me, yeah? Because, typically people, they see how I rectify certain issues. And since I brought up that old case study, that was related to a piece of enterprise SaaS application, which was later acquired by Oracle. It was for the product called Oracle Infinity. It was old, but it was, it's an enterprise level. It's not like everybody can do enterprise, right? As opposed to mobile apps and so on. So I said, I want to freaking show that. And also, that piece happened to be a piece of speculation, because I remember coincidentally one company from Norway, I was being interviewed by people based in Norway and in the US. They were so thrilled to have me present that case study, and they told me, we want to know how you solve similar challenges because we might learn something from you. So we want to see how you managed to solve that, so maybe we can try that and see if it works in our case, because we have similar issues right now and we don't know what to do. And I was like, are you sure? I'm happy to share. But it doesn't mean that what I did may work with you. Bear in mind, I said. But yeah, point is, people see different things. Like also, just to add one more thing, I remember back in the UK, like if you see my old portfolio, it was all dark gray and black. People in London used to love my portfolio. But when I moved elsewhere, the appeal of my portfolio died, especially in the Nordics. So I had to ditch the black and go for white. And that really played a role. But anyhow, I remember I was being interviewed with one company, and they said, oh my God, there is one of your UI pieces that I like. It's so amazing. And I was like, which UI piece is that? And, we were on the phone and I had to open my portfolio and I was like, do they mean that piece of ugly, average dashboard that I did, which I regret putting on my portfolio? And yeah, that one, it's so beautiful, man, and so on. And I was like, what the heck's wrong with these people? I wanted to say. I didn't say that. I was like, oh sure, thank you very much. I said, this is not my best work. I'm going to tell you right away, yeah? I'm thankful that you like this piece of work, but to me, this is just a mediocre piece of work, which I nowadays regret I placed in my portfolio. But point is, other people saw it beautiful, others didn't. And that's one thing I keep on arguing nowadays to everybody. UI design is subjective. What is beautiful to you is not beautiful to others, and this also applies to cultures. I will shed one interesting point. Years ago, one startup from Germany, they reached me out. They found my profile on Wellfound, previously known as Angel, and they wanted to talk to me for a potential role. Now, I didn't pass. And I was not prepared. It was so sudden. Like, they found me today. The next morning, we had to talk immediately.
Oh, right, yeah.
And they acknowledged that we were not prepared. And I said, okay. I said, whatever. We were talking about, so this company operates in India, in agriculture. And we were talking about apps and so on. I regret that I asked that question back then, but I was still naive back then. I said, why don't you have an Apple app? Because they only had Android. The design lead was from India, and he smiled and he said, that's because that was many years ago, right? So things are different nowadays. So this was back in 2008 and 17, 18. He told me, in India, people are more into Android and less into Apple. That doesn't make sense for us. And then we were talking about design, and one thing he told me, which I could also notice, is he told me that if the UI is not flashy, not contrasting enough, not vibrant by colors, it is considered as a bad UI in our area, as opposed to minimalism in certain parts of Europe. And that's something that was a key lesson for me, which I still remember like it happened yesterday. And for instance, this also reminds me, I was walking in Helsinki once and I spotted a lot of tourists I could tell they were from Africa. And the attires they were wearing, it was like a rainbow, literally speaking, a lot of colors, fluorescent green, black, turquoise, red, orange. You can also see that in their flags. These are cultures that enjoy colors as opposed to other cultures that enjoy, 1 to 2 colors, for instance. So that also led me to one question, like, what if I have to design a mobile app or a web page and deploying it there? How will they perceive it? And some time ago, this was in South Korea. I had one fiasco. This was, I worked with one CRO company. I'm going to spill the beans here. So basically,
spill the beans.
We were supposed to do a trial project for McDonald's South Korea. And, McDonald's South Korea is not McDonald's elsewhere. And I was the only designer on my team.
I would love to go to McDonald's in South Korea, by the way. Like, I don't know I can imagine how different a McDonald's in South Korea is. I bet it's really good.
I am not into McDonald's, but anyway, I had a bad feeling about that. And I remember also my ex-director, he's from Canada. He looked at me and he raised his eyebrows. And I was like, God, this is going to be challenging. And I went on their website. And I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be challenging. Because one thing that now I love a lot of Asian cultures. Like pretty much, I'm a big manga fan and so on. Like for instance, such cultures, they use manga, anime as part of the branding. So they use a lot of cartoonish characters, illustrations, and so on. And trust me, it was a freaking difficult project, man.
Oh, I bet. A lot of illustration, I guess you had to do, yeah.
Yeah, how can we optimize their page, considering that we don't know that much about their culture?
That begs the question of why hire a Eurocentric company or team to do that work?
We were present there also. We were present everywhere. So there was also that.
It's interesting because I would have expected, or assigning who works on that project, is there someone, a native South Korean who knows the culture that could have come in and at least advised, and helped art direct a bit?
Yeah, pretty much, we were an international team. So we also had offices in Australia and so on. So that also played a part. I never questioned that, to be honest, but pretty much I saw it as an opportunity. Pretty much it was like this is a one-time event, most likely. Working on such an even though it was tough, but it was a learning experience, man. And that's the thing about design. And this is also something I want to tell to everybody, even though people just take it so damn for granted. Culture, man, culture and geopolitics. Like when I speak about geopolitics, for people just find it strange that I use geopolitics in design, that I design according to the political climate also. And also when it comes to regionalization. And that's why we have a lot of these antitrust cases in Europe with big tech companies from the US, because some things are not compliant. This also comes down to design. Like, I'm jumping from one topic to another. Like I remember the case about Nike when they released Nike Air with that illustrative logo, which was perceived as blasphemy in Saudi Arabia because it was a blasphemy against the religion. And that was back in 2018. Could be even back. But you can Google that. You can Google that.
Yeah, I don't think I recall that, actually.
Yeah, that was a case. And that's why it's important to understand, before you use something, even when you use icons, just make sure you understand what you are using. Like, for instance, it's not the first time I spotted icons which were runic, belonging to ancient Nordic cults, or even, to a certain extent, close even to witchcraft. Sorry for saying that. Or even Viking symbols without even know what probably people wouldn't even know these are Viking. Take the Bluetooth icon. The Bluetooth, it's Viking. It's runic. I'm not sure if people who deployed that icon knew about it, but there is that. But still, point remains on symbolism also and icons. Hence why I worked with people who love icons, emojis, and so on. And I keep on telling them, like, guys, please, not everybody can understand emojis differently, particularly in different countries. And also when you have people with aphasia, which is like a motor damage in the brain, they lose the ability they cannot understand icons. So, The
interesting thing there too, even across cultures is one thing, but within even a country, right, like United States, generational norms, cultures, right? You think about the save and the floppy disk. Nobody uses that anymore, right? Like if you were to have a Gen Zer, I guess, or whatever What is the next generation called? I guess Gen Z. And look at that. They may know what save is only because they've seen it a bunch, but that icon doesn't mean anything to them anymore. They just probably think of it as the save icon. It's not a floppy disk with data being saved onto an actual physical disk anymore, And so even within one society, the generational cultures can be vastly different, and understanding, the context and who you're designing for is incredibly important. And I think that's something a lot of people probably don't think about when it comes to nowadays, like, junior designers, at least. I don't know. Some do, obviously, but
I mean, to put it frankly, I think people just assume that if the design, the product, the service, if it's going to work well, say in country A, it means it will work great in country B, for example. And I think the only people who may be culturally aware are UX researchers, and especially people into CRO and localization. These teams and customer insights, especially from big companies, they will see that, what works in country A may not work well in country B. I have a lot of stories on that. Like, I remember this was with one company in Finland. We were running a lot of A/B tests. And so we were running these pretty much across certain territories to sell the product. And, pretty much, I think there was a moment where, we were doing so great in the Nordics, but not so great in Germany, it happened. Since I happened to be a foreigner, I could pretend, and since I also lived in Germany, I could talk about it. And I said, okay, guys, everybody. So first and foremost, in the Nordics, if you have a foreign product, let's imagine you have a mobile phone. One is made in the Nordics, the other one is made abroad. Tendency is that the Nordics will pick the homemade product. So there is loyalty towards homegrown products as opposed to foreign ones. So subconsciously, that's what they would do. But not in other cultures, such as in the UK, where we are exposed to a lot of marketing campaigns, a lot of products, a lot of adverts. It's like there is no end to that. And the solution happened to be relevant to cybersecurity. So I have to mention that because in Germany, one thing I learned is that when you sell these kind of products, if you have seals of awards, trust seals, you name it, push these on top, because that's how you can perform better in Germany. You have to communicate trust, for example. So in this case, what we had to do is, for the product page, we had to bring the seals and awards on top to make these visible by all means. And also when I did my competitive analysis, not within cybersecurity, but also in other domains, I could always see seals and awards always placed on top, because that's how you can. And in Germany, since I also lived in Germany, that also became a habit. Like, before I apply to somebody, is there a seal? Okay, let me click on this seal.
Where's the seal, bud? You don't have a seal pass.
Yeah, I used to do that.
Put a seal on your resume when you apply to Germany. Put a big old seal.
So there was also that. Yeah. So again, that's why it's important to speak to people. This could also be of colleagues who are familiar with certain nations, with certain cultures. This doesn't design, but again, also to legislation. Because it's not the first time. I mean, let's look at the big tech companies. Like, for instance, I remember when Threads came out. Threads, the Twitter alternative. I never tried it, for starters. But when it got released in the US and in the UK, it wasn't released in Europe, because chances are, I'm going to assume here, I didn't follow the story, chances are Meta had to make sure that they can tick all the boxes before they release it in the European market, because, of course, in Europe, different requirements apply. And this could be the case in other nations. And I'm not gonna get political on that. Pretty much also because we are becoming more regional nowadays, instead of previously we are in, we were talking about globalization. Nowadays, I'm gonna go political, which is one of my hobbies. Since things are becoming more, we have a one world power now. This world power is going to be divided into smaller world powers. So that means conditions apply. There will be different requirements, how we do trades, how we exchange goods, but also how we operate in other nations, and how we can sell our products in other nations, and if we have our offices in another nation, we also have to comply with certain regulations, requirements, and so on. So if this mobile phone is great for the US because it ticks all boxes, doesn't mean that it will be the same in other nations. Hence, again, these antitrust cases and so on. And this also comes down to design in the long run. I mean, because if designers are going to ignore regionalization, then they're going to end up most likely having their product being taken back offline, do some fixes until they achieve compliance, and then come back online. Same with accessibility. Now, my worst fear came into reality. I spoke to a few companies, I'm currently looking for work. So again, coincidentally, it happened to be with a fintech company also. It seems like I have a thing for fintech, even though, anyway, I'm not a fintech guy. Well, okay. I worked in fintech, but coincidentally, the shenanigans always happens with fintech for some weird reasons.
Yeah, it's weird how that always works.
It was an interview, and I asked, okay, how are you guys tackling accessibility? And pretty much, they told me they're really working hard to meet the deadline next year. And pretty much, my point to that is kind of I was afraid that people are gonna leave things for last. My point to that is people also have a habit of leaving things for last. People at last take certain important things for granted, and this is something I see nowadays in the market. People do their best to prove me wrong, and then in time, I end up unfortunately being right, even though wasting so much effort coming across like the freaking scapegoat, or like a black sheep, until people see that I had that point. It doesn't mean that I enjoy being right, to put it that way. Maybe I just happen to be a little bit more, how to say, what would be the right word here?
Intuition about it.
Intuition, okay, intuitive. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So that's why it's important nowadays never to assume that what works in your culture will work amazingly well in other cultures.
So let me ask you this. So you've had a lot of experience working with various countries or working in various countries for various companies inside of other countries, working across cultures and things like that. I think you've made a lot of mistakes probably, and you've learned from those mistakes. But for anybody listening out there who may not have the experience or might have the opportunity, how do they learn these things without insulting somebody or just falling on their face and failing miserably? How might they learn these things before they get into it so that when they do get into it, they're more likely to be successful?
That's a very good question, and I'm not sure if I have an answer to that.
Trial and error.
Trial and error.
Sink or swim.
Yeah, there was trial and error. So I'm going to speak for myself, and I hope I'm not going to come across like a freaking show-off. I think I had the upper hand here because I studied sociology. Psychology, I have a bachelor in psychology. And I also come from a tiny country that is exposed to different cultures. So I think multiculturalism was like in my blood. Like even my parents, they lived and work in the US and Australia. Sorry, my relatives in the US and Australia and Canada. So it's in our DNA to be into cultures perhaps. But I think it should also come down as a self-interest, like an interest. And I think this is also maybe because in my side time, I enjoy, watching about some cool things. For example, being in Japan, living in Japan, working in Japan. And that applies to other nations. Recently, I've been looking a lot about Latin America, Uruguay, Argentina, to see what's going on. And also take interest in news. So I also happen to be I love geopolitics. So I also use that at my advantage. So I think it really comes down to interest. But as a designer, I think even though this will not answer everything, I would start by reading about universal design for starters. Now, this will not be a full answer, but at least this might pave ways for people to explore further. Now, I can be wrong here because Dude, you really brought in a very good question, which nobody ever asked me that question, to put it frankly. Yeah, nobody ever did.
So I get paid all the big bucks. I don't get paid the big bucks. That's a joke.
You should become a journalist, man.
Oh, yeah, probably make more money. Maybe you should.
German news, man. UX news, Beyond News.
Oh, watch out. That would be interesting, actually. Bringing you the news from around the world. I could totally do it.
Yeah, so that's it, man. You know what? What I can do is, I can also think about it. Now, of course, you're going to write a little bit of a bio when you release this session. Maybe you can add a section like a post-podcast, whatever, and you just include additional note, about where to start and so on. Because, no, I never thought about it. Pretty much most of my experience was partially trial and error, being observant, talking to people, And even at times, like being told by other people, like, hey, in country X, we don't do this. In country X, typically people like this more. But again, it also comes down to self-interest. Like, for example, when it comes to communication, I also had to read about how I should communicate with people from certain Asian countries, because I can't it. That can be like a declaration of war, but that can come across as challenging.
Kind of aggressive, yeah.
Yeah, so you have to, typically you have to look at the lips when they talk.
You see, that's a really interesting stuff. You know, the other thing too, I had a really good conversation with Elena Cross, who you might know her from LinkedIn. She's been posting a lot, but she said something that really struck me, and I never really thought about this, but it's certainly true, is, you know, the average, you know, we often learn, we design, we do a lot of the stuff, you know, we learn the average, right? Like, on average, you know, you don't look in the eyes, or on average, you don't do this, or on average, you know, whatever, but no one is the average. You know, everybody together makes up an average, but the average doesn't actually exist. And so you can learn these things, but that doesn't mean every single person is going to be offended if you look them in the eye in an Asian country, you know? So it's like, it's one of those things where you have to just know. And I think your point about curiosity, I think, is spot on, because what we talk about today, maybe your experience with that team, but that doesn't mean every single person that works in that country is going to act and do the same as what your experience was, right? So
Absolutely.
If you don't go and I think this is why, you know, your advice to go and spend the first month just talking to everybody is really understanding that, and see, like, when I'm talking to these people, do they look me in the eye? You know, and I guess it's hard with remote because you can't really, you know, you're not looking anyone in the eye, you're looking in the camera, but that's something to really think about, is like, how do they act? And you sort of try to mimic them in a way, and you understand how they function. And you can't do that if you don't even attempt to get to know them. I have this really interesting, it's funny anecdote that's talking about, we're not, you know, the averages. I used to work for this giant global conglomerate, and we had offices all over the world. And they had offices in India, North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Middle East, like all over the place.
Wow.
And so they would do these cultural trainings. And so we had a team, and we were working with a team in Poland. And we were working with them for about a month or two. This was a pretty big project. We had 5 pods in Poland, so which about 7, 8, 9 developers per pod. We had a few UX designers. I was the UX lead, so I had some UX designers out there that were working with me. Anyway, working with them for about a month, and then after about a month, everyone was just like, "Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Oh, you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job. Oh, this is really great work." You know, we're just like, this is bizarre. You know, like we had a conversation with some of the American guys, and we're like, "Are you getting like thanked more? Like they're complimenting you now more than they did a few weeks ago?" It was enough for us to notice. And what we found out was, they didn't do this for the American team, but for the Polish team, they gave them training on how to work with Americans. And they said that Americans like to be complimented and we like to be thanked. So they all started thanking us and complimenting us because that's what the training said. So anyway, it's just funny because it was so silly, and none of us were offended before. You know, I mean, I guess like in Poland, they are very straightforward, they're very honest, and they're very upfront, and they don't really beat around the bush, which I guess for some Americans can seem kind of, you know, offensive in a way. But I guess it depends. You might take it the wrong way. But it just goes to show you that like having these trainings sometimes can just like be completely useless and meaningless because we're not the average, you know, and so I'm sure some Americans like to be complimented, but it was weird for me. So anyway, I don't know. It's just always a funny anecdote. I like to tell people about that. For some reason, they never gave the Americans training on how to work with the Polish guys, which I always found bizarre. And I found out later that the Indian teams, they had training on how to work with Europeans and stuff, but none of us ever got training on how to work with the other cultures, which I always thought was super bizarre. So anyway, just a funny anecdote.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I mean, back to what I said. I mean, of course, I don't mean to generalize here about the looking to the lips and so on, but also we have to understand and appreciate the fact that other cultures are also studying ours. Like, for example, I also had the opportunity of working with a lot of South Koreans, and, you know, they were so bubbly, outgoing, and so on, pretty much. I've had times I felt like I'm more introverted than them. So I was like more the shy dude among the South Koreans. So also when I started get to know them, pretty much also my sense of humor, pretty much it was well understood, well appreciated, and so on. Even though at times my experience used to be otherwise with other people, but it was a rather mesmerizing experience, I might say. So, and I think it also comes down to interest, like, you know, people taking interest into other norms and so on. But that was interesting about the Polish case, and what you mentioned. But one thing I must say about East Europe is, generally, I tend to find it fun working with Eastern Europeans. They are also a little bit direct like me, so maybe there is that. But one thing I appreciated and also learned from them is they are, now I'm going to generalize here. They are very evidence-based. Like if you say that you went to the moon, prove that you went to the moon, for example. They're not going to take, I mean, they will take your word, but nice to prove that. And this also became part of my nature nowadays. Like if you tell me like, hey, you have a Ferrari, chances I'm going to ask you for a photo just so at least I know that you do have a Ferrari, for example. So that is also something I inherited from coincidentally my Polish colleagues also. Poland, Bulgaria, Ukraine, you name it. And that's the thing. It's just you can never stop learning, man.
Yeah, I love that. That's like maybe the best advice for all of this, right? Like at the end of the day, dealing with all these cultures, whether they are across the same company, across the same country, multi-generational, language, societal, whatever, you just have to be open. You have to want to learn. You have to be thirsty. You have to be curious. And, there's only so much you can learn from reading a book or reading a pamphlet or taking a course. You have to get out there and actually talk to them and do it and probably, fail a lot and insult some people and learn from your mistakes and then keep moving forward. So I love that. So,
yeah, I mean, okay, let's imagine that somebody is not that curious, interested, and so on. And let's bring the workplace as an example. Could even be a client, but I think workplace would be more appropriate in this example. Like if you don't cross the line, pretty much you're not being offensive. So this is acceptable by everybody. If you ask questions, or especially good questions, that is acceptable by everybody. So of course, everybody can understand rudeness. I mean, there is a kind of rudeness that everyone can understand regardless of culture. So of course, it's also a matter of being considerate and, having some common sense. And if you have any doubt, if people have doubts, the good thing is to, ask questions. With certain people, it's not the first time like I asked, like, okay, is it normal to do things here? Like I used to hang out with one Norwegian guy, and it was back in Norway. Like, dude, is it really normal to do such a thing here as a Norwegian? But pretty much we had this kind of friendly conversation. So I used to say, as a Norwegian, as a Finnish, as a Finn, as an Irish, you name it. Or like, now the best part, what I also found to be effective is with food. So people, when they go on vacation, be to meet a client or just for fun, they come back and they bring some goods from other countries. Now, if this happened to be from my own country, like once I tried some Thai sweets, which were made of durian.
Oh yeah, the fruit. Yeah, it smells terrible, but it's really sweet. Yeah,
and so pretty much. I mean, I asked that person who brought this food, like, is this, is this what you eat? Is this what you eat in Thailand? And I remember she was
just a tourist stuff.
Yeah, she was laughing out loud. I mean, to put it frankly. But pretty much it was also helping at building relation, getting to know each other and so on. Even though in our regard we've been colleagues for a long time. But trust me, even when you pick these small talks on these facts, they also help at getting to know where that person comes from, what makes them who they are, and so on. And I'm gonna end up here on this regard. I was so freaking delighted one day when I got a Japanese Kit Kat made with green tea. It was green.
Ooh, I've seen those, and I've never had one. Yeah. They have green ones in the States, but they're mint. And I would love to try the green. I've never had the green tea ones.
A bit bitter. I mean, I can see that. The green tea taste is there, and there's a little bit of that dry bitterness. But that was a surprise.
All right, Joseph. Well, this has been a super insightful conversation, and I think everybody listening out there can learn a lot from your experience working with all these cultures, teams, countries, and everything else. And obviously, though, you're probably going to fail. You're probably going to get something wrong. You're probably going to insult somebody. You're probably going to screw it up. But you know what? Hopefully, the most important thing is that you don't do it next time. You don't insult them twice, because that would be bad. So one more time, before we get out of here, let's give our live event one more plug. We're going to be hanging out September 26th, Thursday. That's 9 a.m. Eastern. And we're going to be doing a live Q&A. People can submit questions early at beyonduxdesign.com/events. One more time, Joseph, before we get out of here, let everybody know some things that you want them to submit some questions about ahead of time, and what can we expect in that live Q&A?
Absolutely. So concerning things people can expect is, in conjunction, also people can ask anything related to job hunting in different countries. Now, in my case, I can focus more with regards to European countries and North America in particular, but can also give some tips with regards to other cultures and nations beyond the West, to put it frankly. in addition to that, I am also happy to take questions with regards to designing solutions for different cultures, different nations, and so forth, and also questions with regards to what I call as regionalization, like designing solutions that fulfill the regulations of a specific country. And that would be pretty much it. So I look forward to all your questions.
I love it. Yeah. And that's the regulations one is really interesting too, because as designers, I imagine a lot of us would just default to whatever the requirements are in that requirements doc or whatever the product manager says. But, sometimes they might not have all the answers. So, I think a lot of times that's on us to sort of dig a little deeper as well. So I'm excited to hear some questions about that. That's going to be really fascinating. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So one more time, beyonduxdesign.com/events, September 26th. That's a Thursday, 9 a.m. Eastern. So hopefully some folks over in the farther off Eastern areas, Asia, places like that will be able to hang out, since I've been doing these sort of late in the afternoon Eastern time, which I know is really hard. So hopefully we'll get a chance to hang out. Don't miss it. So Joseph, I've got some questions that I like to ask all my guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. Do you have time to stick around and answer 5 silly little questions?
Absolutely. Okay, 5 silly questions. Fire number 1.
Let's go. All right. First thing that comes to your head, you don't have to think too hard about it. First up, what is your favorite non-design book?
My favorite non-design book, I don't really have anything. I haven't read for quite a while, though I have one book. If I have to give a straight answer to that, I just love DC Comics. Simple as that. I love The Flash.
There you go.
That's on me.
Comic books, they count?
My favorite hero would be The Flash.
The Flash. Oh, I love The Flash.
Yeah.
Are you watching any of the TV shows too, or do you just read the books, read the comics?
I watched them 3 times already.
DC's got a lot of really cool TV shows, like The Arrow, and they had a Flash show for a while, and
Supergirl.
Yeah, those are really good. Yeah. I like the TV shows because you can do more character building in a TV show than you can just like in a couple hours in a movie, but. Love it. All right. What is your favorite non-design podcast? Do you listen to a lot of podcasts?
Yeah, I don't really.
I can see you listening to like some history podcasts or like stuff like that.
Actually, but not podcasts per se. I mean, I just simply go on YouTube. I type a query and then whatever comes, be it a podcast.
You go down the YouTube rabbit hole?
Yeah, I just go on YouTube. Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. That counts. Yeah.
So pretty much, but I can talk about topics. I mean, pretty much geopolitics, design, and cultures, literally speaking.
I love it, dude. That's great. Yeah. Well, I love a good YouTube rabbit hole. I gotta watch myself though, because I'll end up wasting just like an hour.
Welcome to my world.
Like, what? I have just been watching this for an hour, just one video after. That is the goal. Then they've designed it that way. Smart people. All right. You've lived in a lot of places and you've experienced a lot of things. So I'm curious, what is your favorite meal? This could be something you've cooked, something you've eaten in one of your stints across abroad, or something your grandma used to make. Favorite meal?
I am a big fan of greens, veggies, and so on. But if I have to pick something out of the blues, I freaking love onion bahi, which is like a deep fried onion in India.
Ooh, oh, I'm with you. Anything deep fried, if it's onion, I love it. Is it like the little, they make like little, what do you call those? I'm doing hand signals. You can't really tell, but they're little,
I know what
things.
you mean.
I can't think of the word.
It is just, I mean, they use a particular mixture, which I don't even know. Well, all that matters is that it tastes exotic. I mean, it's almost like with every bite, I could feel the gates of heavens opening wide, man.
I love it, dude. Yeah, I love that. So I'm curious, you living in Malta, I don't know what the cuisine is like. I imagine there's a lot of seafood, but what is Maltese food like? What is that? What would you guys? What's like the national dish of Malta? Do you have a national dish?
I mean, pretty much. I mean, I mean, I can also share on that. I mean, it's been a while since I've been there. So the cuisine, pretty much, we could call it Mediterranean. So it has heavy influences from Italy, Greece, Turkey, slightly from the UK for obvious reasons. Now, coming down to national dishes, well, they are not very vegan friendly. So actually, they're not vegan friendly at all. Octopus stew.
Octopus, okay. I was going to say some kind of seafood.
Rabbit stew.
Rabbit stew, okay.
Yeah, for creatures. And even like oven-baked pasta.
Pasta, okay. Yeah. Some of that Italian coming in.
But I usually stick to pretty much. I'm just a very basic person. I mean, I enjoy salads. Yeah, as I mentioned, pizzas, goddammit, which is not good. But no, I think my biggest guilty pleasure is ice cream, man. Ice cream.
I'm with you, dude. I eat way too much ice cream, probably.
Yeah, mutual.
I'm always sneaking. I love an affogato, so I have an espresso machine. I just do, like vanilla ice cream with like coffee, the espresso on top. I'm like all the time. I'm like, I don't know. It's very bad. I should stop doing that. All right. What is your favorite vacation spot? You got a lot of options living in Europe, so you're only an hour away from like pretty much everything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a vacation spot, a favorite one. And probably if you asked me 5 years ago, I would say otherwise. So nowadays, I'd say cold regions like Nordics. Because,
like the icy,
believe it or not, people would think that Nordics are all ice and so on. No, they have amazing summers. Like, for example, in Norway, we see a lot of high contrast green. They have a lot of nature. It's almost like a picture, like a Photoshop edit.
Oh, I bet.
But you have warm summers, especially in Finland. I remember people just go crazy on the beaches and so on. But you also have
yes, that far north. Okay.
Yeah.
The water's still got to be freezing, though, isn't it? I mean, it can't be. Do you go swimming in the ocean or just hang out on the beach?
Yeah, I mean there are beaches like part of certain waters, like part of that I forgot the names. But anyhow, yeah, like right now, this period, July, August, you can swim, but it gets cold in the evening. Like I tried, I made the challenge to myself. Like I went running once, swimming at 9 p.m. I believe it was still daylight, but the waters were getting cold.
Right.
That wasn't Helsinki. But yeah, I mean, pretty much I see colder places, especially nowadays, given this heat waves and so on. Like I may have to venture in the south at some point. And I got warned already about the heat waves. So I'm like, bloody hell, I'm not sure if I can tolerate that. Otherwise, I could say Caribbean, man, or Japan. I really want to go to Japan one day, man.
You ever been?
No, I've never been there, but I really want to go to a manga store. Maybe I'll just come back with a massive container of manga comics, man.
A shipping container, just send it back over after you. That's awesome. I love it. All right, last question. What is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
Oh, that is not Figma. So much. Yeah, though, I want to try Penplot, which is like a Figma alternative from Spain. They are gaining momentum. And Creati. Creati happened to be like a Figma alternative that harnessed AI accordingly. I haven't tried that one yet. It's on my list. But I keep on reading some interesting testimonials. So, yeah.
Yeah, I keep seeing people posting about Creati on LinkedIn and... I talked to them a little bit about sponsoring the show, but it never went anywhere. But I haven't messed with it, to be perfectly honest. I have to check it out. All right, Joseph. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I learned a lot. You've got such a fascinating backstory and experience, and I think everybody listening out there can learn a lot from you. You are on LinkedIn. Let everybody out there know where they can find you.
Yeah. So the safe at spot is LinkedIn at the moment. So this I can add is I've been wanting to start releasing content about adventures like these that we spoke to, to maybe start focusing on that and maybe to share some insights about how to deal with certain tough cases involving cultures, to put it frankly. So at the moment, LinkedIn, people can follow me there so they will be informed about when I release something in time. But first I have to deal with this impressive, just not to say otherwise, job market.
It is a bitch.
It is a bitch indeed, goddammit, yeah.
I feel your pain. A lot of people out there listening also feel your pain, but, I think it'll turn around. I think it's going to take some time. Fingers crossed. But anyway, all right, Joseph, well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you sharing your insights.
Thanks for inviting me over. It's been a pleasure being on Beyond UX. So to all the listeners, stay tuned to Beyond UX because Beyond UX always deliver. Thank you.
Yeah, you're right, baby. All right, y'all, that's it for Joseph and me for today. I hope we helped to shed a little bit of light on what it's like to go on the job hunt internationally. Can't even begin to imagine what that is like, and God bless anybody who is doing it. You are amazing. But what's your experience been like? Has it been the same as Joseph's, or has it been completely different? Let me know what you think on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I'd love to hear from you. And if you like what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would love it if you left a 5-star review. That would help me out so much more than you can imagine. And if you know somebody who might find any of this stuff useful, then for the love of God, tell them. That'd be fantastic. Don't forget to check out the Beyond UX Design shop. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/shop to pick up some big, beautiful art prints of some of my favorite UX quotes. Get yourself some digital downloads you can print yourself. Get free shipping on all orders over $30 and use the code LISTENER to get 10% off your entire order. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/shop to get your print on. Help keep the show independent and ad-free. Check out beyonduxdesign.com/support to find out how. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, and many others, and help keep the show independent and ad-free. And you'll get rough transcripts, exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, and even episodes before they're released. You can get instant access to the video archives right now for as little as $5 a month. And if you've been sitting on building your new website, Wix Studio can help get you there faster. Wix Studio is a powerful platform that lets you create and manage websites easily. With Wix Studio, you can quickly adapt designs for every device, reuse assets, and my favorite, export from Figma and much more. Check out beyonduxdesign.com/Wix to start creating today. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/Figma and use the promo code BeyondUX at checkout to get $100 off any of their Figma courses. Join over 4,000 designers from industry leaders like Shopify, Microsoft, and Amazon that have already signed up. So kickstart your Figma mastery journey today. Remember to sign up for the newsletter and check out all the past episodes along with all the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. I hope you keep coming back for more great UX tips from Beyond UX Design. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX and design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all.
This photo that you picked for the thing, man, I was like, what the? I was like this, pointing my finger, laughing at myself, man.
I think you look great, personally.
I look at you and look funny, man. Oh, anyhow.